Because of the recent Supreme Court order stating that federal border agents are now permitted to access the border in Texas, and Texas is going to need to take down their razor wire, I thought it would be appropriate to share some relevant quotes from history. And I think you might recognize some of the names that I'm about to quote. But before I do want to make one thing clear. I fully understand and support Texas's concerns, and I think the mass illegal immigration over our southern border is a complete disaster. I also believe that our DC bureaucrats on both sides have failed to act. To add to this, I do appreciate the letter from Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, and he says he's not going to comply with this order. But I also feel like his decision is a bit incendiary, and he is going to need to proceed with extreme caution as to avoid further escalation. I'm going to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn any and all calls for civil war. I condemn any acts of violence against any other humans, period. While I support the state's rights to defend their borders, and I actually do believe keeping the federal agents out is potentially the right course of action, Abbott in Texas really shouldn't be defying a Supreme Court order. And I do see a lot of online discourse that I'm really not fond of. Calls for civil war, etc. And that's exactly why I feel like I have to condemn that. So, okay, with that out of the way, here's the first quote I'm going to share. The great George Washington, our first president, said, "My opinion with respect to immigration is that, except for useful mechanics and some particular description of men and professions, there is no use of encouragement." To me, this sounds like Washington probably would have bolstered the H-1B visa program and helped to ensure that legal ports of entry were open and accepting. However, because the Biden administration's totally failed to address this infiltration, well, it's a de facto encouragement, which is exactly what Washington cautioned against. Next, I've got a quote from Benjamin Franklin. "Unless the stream of their importation could be turned, they will soon so outnumber us that all the advantages we have will not be able to preserve our language, and even our government will become precarious." Franklin's alluding to the need for strict laws surrounding immigration policy into the US. I imagine since his glory days, we've likely installed those laws. The real question is whether or not we enforce them. Well, the answer is, obviously, we don't. And the last quote for today is from Alexander Hamilton. "To admit foreigners indiscriminately to the rights of citizens, the moment they put foot in our country, would be nothing less than to admit the Grecian horse into the citadel of our liberty and our sovereignty." Of course, Hamilton's referring to the famous Trojan horse from ancient Greek mythology. The Trojan horse was used as a front. The Greeks hid inside this massive wooden horse, pretended it was a gift to the Trojans, and the horse was wheeled right into the city. That night, when all of the Trojans went to bed, that's when the Greeks snuck out of the horse and overthrew the entire city of Troy. Are the illegal immigrants carrying out some type of Trojan horse plan against the United States, as Hamilton alludes? Or do we just need stricter laws and enforcement, as Franklin called for in 1753, some 271 years ago? Or maybe we should stop encouraging the mass influx of refugees, as Washington summarized, and begin considering immigrants more on their actual merits rather than just their physical illegal presence inside our country. So hopefully you can see that our founding fathers really did grapple with very similar issues that we are today. The difference, of course, is that these brave men used their voices to enact change, and that was their only option to free themselves from tyranny. But today, the biggest problem we face, in my opinion, is just weak leadership. That guy currently sitting in the Oval Office doesn't share any of the principles held by our founding fathers. He's encouraging illegal immigration despite Washington's warnings by ignoring the issue outright. He's failing to enact laws. In fact, he's reversing laws like Title 42 and the Remain in Mexico policy, despite Franklin's ancient calls for stricter laws and enforcement. And as we witness tens of millions of illegal immigrants bypassing our established processes and avoiding our ports of entry, one is left wondering, is Joe Biden allowing this Trojan horse of illegal migrants into our country intentionally? Hamilton saw this coming in 1802, and here we are 222 years later, and the problem is still worse than it's ever been. So guys, if you think somebody needs to know this information, please share this video, and don't forget to follow me. If you want more of my content, please find me on X. Thanks again for listening.